anyone at all from Shirley Temple to Amy Semple is equally understood. Go out and try your luck, you may be Donald Duck. Hooray for Hollywood.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you are listening to a Radulich and Broadcasting premiere podcast. Damn you, Hollywood! And here's your host. He's here in his car. He feels safest of all. He can lock all his doors. It's the only way to live. In cars! Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Winfree! Yay!
I didn't know what direction you were going to take that this week. I genuinely had no idea.
Yeah.
And you did that.
Spur of the moment. Honestly, just thought of it.
You have soured my entire existence with. Look, this is one of those things that.
Are you that big a Gary Newman fan?
I don't like that song.
You are so weird, man.
I don't know. Look,
what is wrong with Cars by Gary Newman? No, that's it. This podcast is now done. Ford versus Ferrari was fine. What is your problem with Gary Newman?
I'm not anything against him personally.
I hear he's an unsavory fellow.
Hang on, let me look him up. I'm barely aware of who this gentleman is.
Here in my car, I feel safest of all. I can lock all my doors. It's the only way to live in cars. Boo-doo, boo-doo, doo-doo.
Yeah, no, that song, man, just nope.
All right.
I've kind of expressed to you my musical taste in the past. Like it's a little bit on the eclectic side.
Well, I know. I mean, you like your Fields of Verdun. How many people you want dead in this video? Yes. So you like your, I guess, your progressive metal, from what I remember.
A little bit. I like older metal. I hate to say the generic hard rock stuff, but a little bit on the more generic side, probably, all things considered. I don't dig deep into the. I don't deep dive on music. That's not really kind of what I go.
Sure.
But I like metal. I like, again, hard rock.
You're not an 80s new wave guy.
Not at all.
Okay, well, I can see then why you hate this song.
I don't like most pop music generally.
Okay. I got it.
And, well, what's the other thing? I discovered a few, I think last year at some point, the Dark Country albums, and I really dig on that. So.
Sure, yeah. Johnny Cash, The Highwaymen, Merle Haggard. That shit's the best.
Well, no, have you heard the the Dark Country stuff, like the newer stuff that they've put out?
There's newer Dark Country because I thought everything was the Florida Georgia line.
Oh God, I will find some of these and I will link them to you. It is the modern continuation of that school of music.
Okay. Here in my car, I can only receive. I can listen to you. It keeps me stable for days in cars. Doo-doo.
You know, at least you didn't.
Doo-doo.
I will say this. At least you didn't do the Stewie Griffin variation of that from that episode of Family Guy.
Well, now that you've reminded me of it.
Okay, do it.
No, I don't remember the whole bit.
Fair enough. All right, everybody.
You know what I do remember? I do remember him singing Rocket Man like Shatner.
Well, everyone remembers that.
I'm a Rocket Man. Go ahead.
All right, everybody, getting this thing back on track, because last week I promised Mark we'd be out of here in less than 2 hours.
Liar!
We'll see. Tonight here on Damn You Hollywood, we are reviewing the... It's not really a biopic. It's, sports drama is probably the appropriate way to describe it.
Based on real events.
Yeah, this is a dramatization of the real events of the early 60s that led to, very famously, the Ford company besting the Ferrari Motor Company at the Le Mans the Le Mans
race.
There's a specific endurance race that I got there. Don't know why my brain faded on me there. which is again a very, very famous race, and it's a retelling of that story. And I kind of lobbied for this to be on the schedule, and I feel pretty good about that one actually.
Yeah, it goes against what we normally do here, but I have to occasionally throw Robert an appropriate film bone, or he's just, or no matter what we review from that point on, he'll just scream, "It's crap," and I can't get him to focus and do like an actual review. It's kind of like he just gets this angry beach ball on his forehead. So I have to pepper in the occasional meat on the bone proper film, or Robert becomes utterly useless to me. He's like a seized car engine.
Look, the fact that on occasion we have to watch and talk about something that isn't utter dog crap, I consider a good thing.
Whatever. Boring.
Come on, you and I both know that if we had to sit here and try to talk... do you really want to sit here and try to talk to me about either Midway or Charlie's Angels?
Midway, no. That sounds... that sounds dreadful. Charlie's Angels, that's what I live for.
Yeah, no. I'm not saying I'm not at all talking about your enjoyment, but do you really think you and I have anything...
That's what I'm saying.
You really think that making me sit through that...
Robert, I find you breathlessly angry highly entertaining. So if nothing else, I would be entertained by you being spitting mad and angry with me for making you sit through that. But my
anger at that movie would be more entertaining than the movie itself.
By far. There's no debate about that. But Damn You Hollywood is nothing if not inclusive.
Oh, shut up.
and what is it they say in AEW? Sensory inclusive, I think it is. For all of you who have developmental disorders, Damn You Hollywood really is for all people. We look at all films for all people. That's what we do here.
No. I occasionally twist... Look, you twist my arm 90% of the time. Occasionally I reverse position.
Okay.
That's kind of how that goes.
This had the benefit of being interesting to me. It's not like, again, the competition was Charlie's Angels and... wasn't Midway. Midway was last week.
Yeah, I brought that up just because it was... I know it was released right around the same time as this.
I would say...
We occasionally push reviews a week.
I think... Well, this past weekend, the only two movies, and I saw them both. I saw Charlie's Angels and I saw Ford versus Ferrari. I don't know... I'd have to look back and see what else was on the calendar, but I don't think anything else really jumped out at me.
No, it's slow week.
So, this was not an... When I saw it and I read about what it was, I was interested in the story, so this wasn't really a...
So when you put Charlie's Angels on the schedule and I said I will not watch this, he said, okay, how about this? Okay, we can do that.
So like I said, this was an easily agreeable upon film. I liked the cast. I was interested in the story. It was something my wife wanted to go see, so clicked all the boxes for me.
Yeah, I am grateful on the rare occasion I get to come on this show and talk about a movie that is good that I was actually somewhat interested in seeing.
You know what? I should have made you review. I should have said I don't want to do this. I don't feel like it really fits into the milieu of Damn You Hollywood. And instead, I should have insisted we do Dolomite Is My Name. Oh, that movie is so punk rock.
Yet another thing I would not have watched.
Plot synopsis. Go.
Just for the record, Eddie Murphy has been dead to me for, I'm 34, 26 years.
Dolomite Is My Name was so much fun. I enjoyed the shit out of that.
Okay, hang on. Then in all seriousness, how do you think I would have felt watching it then?
I don't... It's the true-ish story of how Rudy Ray Moore developed the Dolomite character and proceeded to become famous on the back of the Dolomite character and then the making of the Dolomite movie. I don't think you would have appreciated the topic. I don't think it's a topic that really interests you. I love blaxploitation. I love the Dolomite character, and so I was interested in how we got from A to Z with it.
Okay.
Look,
I can see why that appealed to you. Just for the
Sure.
record, when you said Dolomite is my name, I have I know it's a thing. I know Eddie Murphy stars in it. Beyond that, zero context.
So Dolomite was a character created by Rudy Ray Moore that was the Dolomite movie itself is a blaxploitation movie, but it was like bad by blaxploitation levels. Like,
wow, that's bad.
Yeah, it's laughably bad, but it's like a cult classic, and it made, I want to say, like on a $30,000 budget, if the movie is correct, it made like $10 million.
Yeah, that kind of stuff does happen. All right. Anyway, with that out of the way, the plot for Ford v Ferrari. We open with Carroll Shelby's, played by Matt Damon. I got to get this out of the way. I got to do it once, and I'm only doing it once. Okay.
Hang on, before you do, I just want to correct myself. Budget was an estimated $100,000. It made $12 million at the box office, according to Wikipedia.
You know what? That is a really, really great return on investment.
Yes, it was. Go on.
I have to do my Matt Damon thing, but I'm only going to do it once. Because I don't know, I am compelled to do this now. But he's Matt Damon, he got to be in the race car, just for one scene. We open with Carroll Shelby, played by Matt Damon. His winning race at Le Mans, he was one of the very few Americans to win that particular race. He won in 59. Yeah. So we get to see a little bit of that. Then we flash forward to, I think it was 1963, was when this movie, if I have a criticism, muddles the timeline of this entire sequence of events to a significant degree. And it's there's not really a sense of the passage of time. And for a story that takes place over the span of 3 years, there's not, like, that could have been, we could have done something with that maybe. But anyway, the story itself opens properly in 1963. Carroll Shelby is forced to retire from racing due to a heart condition and begins selling Shelby Cobras, which are really nice cars by all accounts, handmade, solid aluminum bodies. I'm not a big car guy, but there's a few of these that I'm loosely familiar with. The inciting incident, essentially, for all of this is the dwindling sales of the Ford Motor Company, which was struggling a little bit at the time, falling behind mostly Chevy. And Henry Ford II trying to kind of find something to kickstart to revitalize the market for the Ford brand. Fortunately, by the time we get around to the actual racing section, they have released the Ford Mustang, which did single-handedly essentially revitalize the Ford Motor brand name when it comes to the American automobile market. But one of the proposals for, hey, let's get some fire here, comes from John Bernthal playing the character of Lee Iacocca, who is sadly marginalized in this movie. Not just the actor, but the role, but the true story of that gentleman.
He deserves his own movie.
He really does. Anyway, he suggests that the Ford Motor Company get in bed with racing, and not that silly NASCAR stuff, legitimate racing. Look, I can appreciate personally, I can appreciate NASCAR as a very refined form of racing. Same way I appreciate boxing as a very, very refined form of unarmed combat. That said, I am not necessarily drawn to the most refined form. I'm drawn to the most complete form. But rather than simply try to build a racing group from the ground up, his suggestion is, hey, Ferrari. They've won they've won like 5 out of the last 6 instances of the Le Mans race. They are synonymous with winning. They're a high-end performance motor company, and at the moment they're bankrupt. The CEO, Enzo Ferrari, I believe, spent the vast majority of his fortune chasing down perfection, trying to perfect his car. And in the words of the movie, he basically got there, but he's broke. If we buy this, if we merge, we can simply attach ourselves to the success of their racing team. And it's not a bad deal, but when they go to the Ferrari company and propose this, Ferrari simply uses the interest of the Ford company to leverage Fiat for a better deal. They give him more money. I think the offer from Ford was $10 or $12 million. My Italian is a little bit rusty. I forget what the exact number was. He gets 18 from Fiat and retains ownership over the Ferrari. He retains a bunch of ownership over it, and then dismisses all of the good people, including John Bernthal, with some insulting words about the company and Henry Ford II. Once those words are relayed, Henry Ford decides, no, I am not going to take this. We're going to develop something. We're going to get there, and we're going to beat this guy at his own game. In the process of doing this, they decide to recruit Carroll Shelby, who's a designer of some renown and a former driver who had won the race in question. Shelby at the moment is primarily kind of running his own car sales business, as well as some racing that is done, his primary driver being that of Ken Miles, played by Christian Bale, who is an exceptional driver, but difficult to work with. And this ragtag group of misfits is going to take down the Ferrari empire, of course. So Shelby is hired by Ford, given some degree of autonomy, but not a whole lot. He brings in Ken because Ken's the best driver. They start developing what will become the Ford GT40. Initially, it's the Mark I prototype, but there's a lot of issues with that. That's something that kind of a lot of the drama around Ken Miles' character comes when at the announcement, the launch party for the Ford Mustang, he's there and he insults the Mustang to the executive vice president of Ford, played by Josh Lucas. And his line is great. Like, you should fix X, Y, Z, and even if you did all of that, I'd still buy a Chevy Chevelle, and that's a piece of shit car. Which is just as far as just burns go, that is an all-time great. So there's acrimony there. They go to Le Mans the first time. Doesn't really go so well. All 3 of the Ford GT40 Mark I's wind up breaking down over the course of the race. But Shelby is able to sell the idea that, okay, this had issues, but let's look at the positives. On our final lap during the big straightaway, we got up to 218 miles an hour. Nothing's ever gone that fast on that racetrack. We can still build from this, and next year we can absolutely win. This is sold, but he does. His big condition is, I'll report to you, Mr. Ford, but I can't do this by committee. I can't do this. This is a racing. If we're going to build a racing team and this type of automobile, you can't do it the way you've done everything. The way previous things have been done. Let me do this the right way, and we can win. They refine, they redevelop, they get to the Ford GT Mark II. There's a little bit of more drama when Josh Lucas's character is promoted to be over the racing division, and he's for want of a better expression, a corporate shithead. And continues to try and finagle and get Ken out of commission. Carroll makes a bet with Henry Ford. If Ken Miles wins the first ever Daytona 24-hour race, then Ken gets to stay in the driver's seat, but if he loses, he will sell the Shelby American brand to Ford. Just, he'll sell it to him straight up and all of it. Ken Miles is able to win the race, yay, because the film kind of would have ended right there if he lost. They go to Le Mans. They are ultimately successful. All three of the Ferrari cars in question actually failed to finish the race, if memory serves. They wound up... A couple of them crashed early. One of them blew a head gasket late. The last little bit of drama that stems out of this is once they know that Ford is going to finish first, second, and third, there's a command rained down from on high. Have all three of them cross the finish line together at the same time. One of the cars in question was so many laps back it wasn't even relevant. But one of them was, I think, close enough to the lead, to the one in the lead driven by Ken, that it plays into the finish. Ken's not really happy about this. You really shouldn't tell a race car driver to go slower, as a kind of general principle. So in somewhat defiance, he turns in what is basically the perfect lap at that space and time. But he ultimately does go along, plays in for the tie for first, and the way the movie plays this is not... It's a little bit iffy as far as the history of this moment goes. Because when they went to a photo finish, the actual thing went to a photo finish, and the other driver, McLaren, finished ahead of Miles. In this, they play it off as, well, in the event of a tie, they're going to give it to whichever car started further back because they will have traveled further over the course of the 24-hour race. And I look, someone who knows more of the history can correct me on that if I'm mistaken. That might be the policy of the race. Like, if we get a tie, then whoever started further traveled further and therefore wins. But I think at the time it was just, no, he actually did finish a little bit ahead, and there were some rumors that Ken Miles just let him kind of get that last few inches ahead just because he was a little bit annoyed about being told to go slower. So Ken is denied his prize, which would have been he would have had the Triple Crown for endurance races, as he would have won the Daytona 24-hour, the Sebring something or other 24-hour, and then the Le Mans all within the same year, which is a hell of a thing to do. But he actually seems a bit at peace. He's a little bit less temperamental by this. He knows I think it's partially at least because he knows that was his race. He chose to kind of let that happen to not ruffle too many feathers. He is universally acknowledged by everyone else as, no, you won that race, buddy. He and Shelby go off to start trying to plan, okay, but how can we make it better? The idea for the whole, making the entire chassis and whatnot out of bonded aluminum to reduce weight is brought up, which they wound up doing. We do see the unfortunate death of Ken Mills when he is testing what would go on to become the Mark III. This is the GT40 Mark III. Shelby passes on some words and some memorabilia to Miles' son, the relationship between Miles and his son is played a lot throughout the course of the film. He drives off kind of into the sunset, and the title card our closing title cards wind up giving us that Ford wound up continuing its winning streak. They won the next 3 years in a row, so they wound up winning in total 66, 60... Was this one the 60? Yeah, they won 66, 67, 68, and 69. Again, which is an incredible streak, and they are still to date the only American manufacturer to win that particular race. It mentioned that Miles was posthumously inducted into the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America, doesn't say when. It was in 2001. They omit that from the title card. And mentions that Carroll Shelby went on to be one of the most celebrated sports car designers of all time. And again, that's the movie. Again, Mark and I kind of joked at the beginning of this. There's not a whole lot wrong with this. So, Mark, let's start with the positive and kind of go from there, which was a nice change of pace.
The star of this movie is the racing sequences. And if they don't work, then the movie is held up by superior performances. But, you know, we came to see race cars. And I will tell you that I saw this in the Dolby Theater at my local chain, and the changing of the gears and the stepping on the pedals and the crashes, it was all... There was a debate in my house about bringing the kids to go see this, and I think my daughter would have been able to get through it just fine. And I think my son, who, you know, likes... Like, we're not a NASCAR home or anything, but I think on the occasion that I've shown him racing cars, and certainly playing with Hot Wheels, he's enjoyed. I think he would have enjoyed the racing sequences. However, hearing the sound that they were making in the Dolby Theater, we would have had to leave. It sounded like guns going off. It was so loud. And so credit to the sound designer and ADR and all of that. It was a very enveloping and atmospheric experience. You really feel like you're there at times. You feel like you're in the car in certain scenes of the movie with Christian Bale. The sequences themselves, you know, sometimes, especially with CGI, it's easy to say that, well, the magic of movie making is kind of gone. Everything is done with computers now. You know, it's just teams and teams of graphic designers and coders and whatnot just sitting there making movies on computers. It's, you know, it's not like the 70s where George Lucas invented an entire special effects unit on the go as they were filming the thing. But this really was, you know, for not being an Avengers, sci-fi, fantasy, you know, Lord of the Rings type of film, it's amazing what they were able to accomplish. One of the nice things about this movie is if you're a race car person and you kind of obsess over the details, maybe this didn't affect you the way it affected me, but I don't know anything about Le Mans. I really don't know a whole lot about race car driving, so there were some finer points of this that I found really interesting and legitimately, like, shook me up at times. So here's an example of that. All the race cars kind of, like, I'm used to, the little bit that I've seen has been like NASCAR or something, or Mario Kart. And it's the cars all kind of starting in lines, and they go, and they all kind of start off pretty okay, pretty effortlessly, eventless. There were races in this where cars are just fucking colliding into each other from the get-go. And you have...
There is a lot more contact made in races like this, and in this style of... especially with the cold start style. I mean, NASCAR, they do the gentleman start your engines thing. Mm-hmm. And then everybody gets up to speed. You're just not allowed to go faster than, I forget whatever the number is, before the start of the race. So everyone is already traveling at least 50 some odd miles an hour, and then everything ramps up very quickly. Cold starts like this, you get a lot more of people running into each other.
It was insane. And then the sound it makes, you know, the cars just blowing up and smashing. You know, one of the cliches now in filmmaking is the T-boned car accident where the car drives into frame. So you have a car that's coming at you on screen, and another car comes into the frame and T-bones the other car, usually at a high impact. You've also seen people get run over in the same fashion. Like the one that comes to mind, the end/beginning of one of the recent episodes, of the Debbie Ryan show that Sean and I review, Insatiable. Dixie, is just standing. She gets out of her car. She stands in the road. Immediately gets run over by a truck. Spoilers. So, I just to the point where I bring it up because it's just so cliched. Now I see it over and over and over again. So it was nice that this film really took some of the finer points and elements of car racing and gave them a life of their own, and really drew a casual to non-race watcher like myself into it. And I got really into those scenes. I'm right there with Christian Bale when he's going bloody hell as cars are wrecking around him. It was incredible. We make fun of Matt Damon all the time, and look, when you
my Matt Damon thing is a gimmick at this point because
Sure.
It amuses me, it amuses my family, it amuses you to some degree or another.
But
hopefully it amuses the listeners. But he's a solid actor when he puts effort in.
I was going to say, I think the knocks on Matt Damon partially come from his behavior in public and his attitude, I think, towards certain political agendas, we shall say. And some of it is his choice in films. This was probably one of his best performances. I got very lost in the role. I stopped feeling like I was looking at Matt Damon and I was looking at Carroll Shelby. Same thing with Christian Bale. Christian Bale, I said if I talked about nothing else tonight, I wanted to make sure I brought this up. Christian Bale is probably one of the most subtle, best physical actors I've ever seen.
Oh yeah.
When you talk about physical acting, someone like Jim Carrey comes to mind, where he's just a ball of energy and he's chewing scenery, but he's using his whole body. And if you look at when he was the hot it guy and it comedian in Hollywood, during the Ace Ventura, Liar Liar era, he was extremely physical, and that's not Christian Bale. Christian Bale does little things like he creates this character. I don't know if the real Ken Miles did stuff like this, but he would do things like tilt his head forward and jut his chin out. And it's little things like that separate the wheat from the chaff in terms of performers. Anyone can do a line reading. This guy throws his whole self into it. And I know he gets knocked for Batman voice, but Christian Bale is one of the best actors in Hollywood right now. For him to generate this whole persona using his entire body without going Jim Carrey, I think he should be afforded special applause for that. The guy is amazing.
You and I have, on occasion, lamented the inability of a lot of contemporary actors to act physically.
Yeah.
They're unbelievably obsessed with their own eyes and their own face. And it is relatively sad that there are so few actors who consider the totality of their being when they get into acting. I mean, this might not be the best example, but the guy who played Cyclops in the original X-Men trilogy, James Marsden, I believe.
Yes.
Not exactly the best actor in the world, even without a giant prosthesis attached to his face. But you stick that on his face, and suddenly he's more wooden than the jokes about Keanu Reeves. He's got nothing.
I know Johnny Depp's not your favorite actor, but Johnny Depp I always thought was very, very good about acting through various prosthesis. Various thank you. Makeup, garb, just, Johnny Depp loves to put costumes on. And really, he famously really wanted to ugly himself up for Pirates of the Caribbean, and he was told no. Calm the fuck down. You're dreamy, and we got to sell this motion picture to kids. So, but But he's a guy who I think is successful at that. I don't think he's as good as Christian Bale. Probably goes without saying. But he's another one that's sort of in that like top 10 actors who are able to really emote and act physically through any costume, any facial prosthetic, anything you throw on them. And even if they're just in regular clothes, they always give an interesting physical performance.
Yeah, so point being, I wholeheartedly agree with you about Bale's take on this guy. He does a great job with his posture at different times.
Yes.
Sometimes he's, a little bit hunched and a little bit, but, forward facing. His shoulders are more tipped towards you, especially if he's combative. And then other times when he's feeling good, everything's back, everything's more open. That scene of him walking up the beach for their celebration after his win at the Daytona race. If you just put the way he walks in that scene against the way he walks, carrying groceries when Carol Shelby kind of confronts him about coming back, there is no comparison. It's like it feels like two different people.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very tremendous physical job that he did with that guy, with this performance. And the act of, again, the ability to act physically beyond what your face does is something of a lost art in movie making these days. It's a crying shame.
One of the legs in the table that holds this movie up is the relationship between Matt Damon's character and Christian Bale's. If they're not working, if they don't have a kind of chemistry together, then I think the film doesn't work nearly as well. Luckily, they do. I think Matt Damon and Christian Bale are kind of a weird duo, but it works. I was interested. They put forth a performance, and they were able to sit in frame with each other and really feel natural. I felt like these two characters had known each other for a while. This isn't like Robert De Niro and Al Pacino in Heat. Where that was more of like an Ultimate Warrior Hulk Hogan kind of a moment, where whether or not this works, it doesn't matter. It's the two in frame together with nothing but a table between them. This was more. There was more chemistry, more magnetism between. And look, this is a great setup for a lot of gay jokes. I don't even want to go there. They're too good. They're too good for me to want to make fun of. Which is a really weird thing for Mark Radulich to say. So Matt Damon and Christian Bale, I could see them in frame, and he listened to them talk. Like one of my favorite scenes of the movies, actually, and they show a lot of it in the credits, is them talking in the diner and about what the plan here is, and famously in the trailers, like, well, how long did you tell him you needed? 400 years, 90 days, but. Throughout the movie, Christian Bale and Matt Damon have a lot of shared dialogue and scenes together. And I was definitely, when they're not focusing on the racing, I was drawn in by their give and take.
It is unbelievably difficult to represent on screen manufactured years of rapport. And again, these two guys do not meet in this movie. They already work together. They already have history. So it has to feel like that. And that's a tough thing to replicate. Again, to replicate on screen. It's not impossible.
They also don't push each other out of frame. Nobody's outshining the other. No one's fucking the scenery. And I say that because I had this issue with a movie like Training Day, where Ethan Hawke and Denzel Washington share so much screen time together. But Ethan Hawke might as well have been played by my son for the amount that he brought to that character compared to how big Denzel Washington was in that movie.
In all fairness, that's just Ethan Hawke. Like, your son is more interesting on screen than Ethan Hawke is in virtually everything.
Fair enough.
But yeah, Denzel is just... I almost wonder if someone hasn't just cut that movie together to the point, like, done a recut of it where there is no Ethan Hawke character and it's just Denzel Washington monologuing essentially.
Yeah, I mean, look, the scenes with the Mexicans would make no sense, but other than that, the movie would work just fine.
Yeah, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. These two, in their performances, enhance each other rather than in any way, shape, form, or fashion trying to overshine each other. Another somewhat rarity.
I really have to hand it to the screenwriters. I don't know what Ken Miles' wife was really like in real life.
Oh, God. Thank you for bringing this up.
I don't know anything about Molly Miles. I don't know if she was invented for the film or whatever, but I've been showing my son the Rocky movies, and he hasn't brought it up. He's more focused on the action than he is the characters. But at some point, he will probably reach the conclusion that I have reached and I have talked about many, many times, whether it was Long Road to Ruin or as I'm doing now in comparison to things. Adrian is the worst on-screen wife in the history of film. She's just terrible. She's not written well at all. And what is written of her is so, like, nails on a chalkboard bad that I love the Rocky movies. I just hate the Adrian character. And thankfully she's not in a large part of those movies. She has her bits here and there, but the movie centers around Rocky and kind of Paulie. Like, their relationship was more fun to me to watch.
Just to piggyback on that, the relationship between Rocky and Paulie after Rocky 3 is much more interesting than anything that happens with Adrian throughout Rocky, certainly Rocky 4 and
I will
5.
tell you the relationship with him and Paulie is more interesting from the start till the end of the series. But
I would disagree. There's two things in particular that kind of run contrary to that. I like the way Adrian kind of comes out of her shell in the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually like their relationship in Rocky 3. I like that she's the one who kind of reads him the riot act about, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this.
Sure.
But don't beat yourself up about it. If it's going to be over, fine. I can live with you if it's over, and I'd be happy. But if this is going to eat at you for the rest of your life, you're going to be insufferable.
Admittedly, I had a very strong positive reaction to that the last time I watched it, which was only like a week or two ago. But I bring it up to talk about how Adrian's always been kind of my go-to, maybe harshly. I think that's a conversation for another day, though. Adrian's sort of my go-to for poorly written or just... I don't say poorly written like this is a bad characterization. It's more of just an insufferable character. I call it the Adrian scale, and whenever there's a movie wife, I usually compare them to Adrian. 0 to 10, 10 being just the worst Adrian, 0 being the best Adrian. And I have to say, Molly's like a 0 or a 1. She's great.
Yeah, I really did like. She is very. When I say supportive, I don't mean in this kind of like passive way, like, oh no, women must be supportive of men. This is their role. That's utter horse crap. Anyone's peddling that is, again, just not worthy of your time or energy. But she knows what she's in. Like, she's not like, I married you and you weren't a race car driver and now I'm not happy about this. Like, no, she knows what she was in for. Like, she was aware of this. And she does support the fact that he wants to do this. In fact, the first time he tries to quit because, okay, there are financial realities now that have to be addressed, she actually does say, if you're not really ready to walk away on your own terms, don't.
I absolutely love the scene where she nearly kills the two of them in the station wagon.
And
that's good stuff.
I also like her reaction to that, which is because she doesn't like. She's angry, but she's not angry that you're racing again. Like, I thought we were beyond this. She actually does say, Just don't lie to me about it.
Right. And that's
I'm willing to support you in this endeavor, but for God's sake,
that's
don't
a very
sneak
wifey
around behind my back.
Yeah, that's a very wife thing to say. Like, wherever we're going, know that I'm your partner and I'll be by your side, and you know, I'll help pull you through. You know, but you got to be honest with me. A relationship built on a mountain of lies is not a relationship that's long for this world. That's her only point. Is we'll do what we need to do and we'll do it together, but you got to be honest with me. And you know, she's not wrong.
No, she's not. I like it. And again, her point is correct. And I did love that. Well, how much are they offering? $200 a day. Well, why didn't you already say yes?
Right. The other scene I really like between the two of them, and again, you know, a movie like this, you know, we talk so much about like the big budget ones. That's the real thrust of this show. But watching, you know, we talk about relationships in movies, and you know, we already talked about Matt Damon and Christian Bale, but their relationship on screen was really good too. You know, the scene where they're talking about losing the garage and, you know, and having to deal with the IRS, and maybe it helps the fact that they're both British. So that added an element of fun to it for me in the way the dialogue was delivered. But she just kind of looks at him at one point and she goes, "So we're basically boogered." It's good stuff. She's not an insufferable twat. She's not nails on a chalkboard. She's not malevolent. She seems to be just a good, normal human being dealing with the situation that they're in a halfway sane fashion, which was nice to see because you don't see it a lot.
Yeah, like halfway decent and sane characters in movies, especially the type of movies we review here mostly. They're at a premium.
Yeah. It's weird to say that it's like, hey, she was normal and I was sympathetic towards her point. The fuck was the last time I said that? I have two problems with this movie, and they're both with the use of two particular characters. I feel like you could have put a broom in the part of John Bernthal, and it wouldn't have made a difference. They don't use him, and he's so good.
The very few handful of scenes they let him talk. Like, he's great. His presentation about, hey, we should buy Ferrari, the fact that he has to ad-lib over his slide projector breaking down is really good. When he goes to recruit Carroll Shelby, he sits there in that scene with Matt Damon, and he oozes the right kind of charisma as he and Shelby are talking about this stuff. He is utterly wasted. And not only him as an actor, the character, he plays a gentleman by the name of Lee Iacocca.
Okay, so my wife and I were talking about this. Wasn't Lee Iacocca like a huge personality during this period of time?
Oh my God, you have... I did a quick search on this because I wanted to have as many of my facts straight as I could get about this. Again, I am not deeply familiar with the material. He was the guy largely behind the thrust of both the Ford Mustang and the Ford Pinto. Like, they weren't his babies, but he's the one who got him going. He was actually the president of Ford for a period of time. He just kept clashing with Henry Ford II and was eventually relieved of duties. At which point, he was recruited to basically be the CEO of Chrysler, and then essentially pulled them out of their downward spiral. I mean, this is he negotiated a guaranteed buyback loan from the government because Chrysler was so far in debt. Got the loan, turned the company around, and fully paid off the federal government 7 years before the anticipated, before they were supposed to. This guy was a big deal. I mean, you and I mentioned it kind of briefly in passing. I want to see Bernthal do him in a biopic. That's what I want to see at this point.
Yeah. So he gets marginalized, though, after the first act.
Yeah.
And then he's never really allowed to do anything on screen again because everything went to Josh Lucas, who plays Leo Beebe. And he does he does smarmy executive really, really well.
Josh Lucas is a fairly smarmy human being. It comes across well on screen.
Yeah. Here's my problem. There are certain things that he does in the film that, I mean, at 152 minutes and a lot of it's spent on a racetrack, I get you gotta cut certain things. It's not that I couldn't follow what he was doing. There's plenty of inference. You have these characters, they're doing shitty things. I think some more scenes of Leo Beebe kind of smarmily snuggling up to Ford, and maybe kind of getting some of the other side to... Because here's the pattern of the movie, for the most part. I mean, there's a couple of times where you see stuff like that, but largely it's Carol kind of reacting to the next dumb thing Beebe does. And then having to then deal with the fallout of Miles flipping out about it. This happens a couple times in the film, and I think I would have just liked to have seen Beebe, going through those machinations. What led to the thing that led, that became him confronting Shelby. Not enough of that. So the film is largely held up by Shelby and Miles. And there are villains there kind of orbiting the situation, but I don't feel like you spend enough time with the villains because you're too busy telling this other story. And so it's basically, there were these guys, they faced adversity, shit kind of happened, and then Miles dies at the end. Like, okay.
I almost would have rather they removed Beebe as an antagonist. Like, that might sound weird for this movie, but hear me out. I almost feel like they could have told this same story and made it more about the achievement than trying to personify this one guy as the corporate boogeyman.
Well, here's the thing. And this is my other kind of issue with this film. It's not as hit you over the head as some other movies are, but there is definitely an anti-corporate bias in this movie.
Yeah, pretty heavily in point of fact.
Corporations are dumb, rebels are fun, here's racing. That's kind of the movie, which doesn't really offend me, but it's there, and it does... I feel like when they were trying to figure out what's our story going to be, because our story could just be, the story is called Ford versus Ferrari, and Ferrari just sort of exists in a vacuum.
Boy, they could have had, and again, this would have changed elements of the structure of the movie. I am aware of this. I'm not saying like this would be an easy thing to do, but after that Le Mans where none of the Fords finish, but there's elements of their performance that go really well. Could we not have had some stuff with the Ferrari crew freaking out a little bit about this? Like, again, Enzo goes to some of his guys and goes, hey, they hit like 220 miles an hour. If they figure out some of this other crap, we're going to be in trouble. How about we step it up, gentlemen?
Yeah, I wish. And that's the thing. Like, the movie is called Ford v. Ferrari. Ferrari should have been the villain.
Yeah, I mean... I think kind of my go-to at this point for discussions about, especially sports dramas, of the achievement itself being this obstacle that they're overcoming is so great that we don't need some grinning, hackneyed antagonist poking them along the way.
Mm-hmm.
I am too. I think Miracle, the story of the 1980 U.S. men's Olympic hockey team.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few different points of conflict between characters, but there's no one actively trying to undermine the team. There's no one from this committee trying to tell Kurt Russell, no, you have to do it this way. Or, like, no, what they're trying to accomplish is in and of itself enough of an achievement without all of the other BS.
Yeah.
And what was the other one? Crap, it completely escaped my mind at the moment. If I think of it, I'll bring it back up. But that's what I think they needed to do here. And again, you can still have Josh Lucas's character exist, and you can have him at different points have different interests than the racing crew, because that's not his primary concern. But having him at every turn being this, shitheel, just because, we'd like to really kind of hammer home that we're anti-corporate. Like, we have an anti-corporate stance on this. Never mind that. Hey, guess what financed your movie, guys? The blatant hypocrisy of all that crap gets to me from time to time.
And look, to be clear, these are nitpicks.
Yeah,
these are kind of Monday morning. Well, what could they have done better with this? But the movie works just fine on its own. I wish Josh Bernthal had a bigger role and they used him more, and he was a bigger part of the picture. I wish they had done more with Josh Lucas. I wish they had done more with Ferrari, and maybe I don't know what you cut though. This is the age of Extinction Problem. At almost 3 hours.
No! Stop that! I told you exactly what to cut out of Age of Extinction.
I really don't want to get into it with you of the minutia of that comment. The point of it was, it becomes a what do you cut?
Yeah, and as I was watching this movie, again, this is a long movie. I think 152 minutes.
Yep.
And as I'm watching it, I know it's long. This movie doesn't drag in any place. It's not at no point was I watching this going, get on with it.
Right.
That never happened. At the same time, you are aware this is a long movie. Like there's no getting around it.
And, like, one might be saying, well, maybe cut some of the scenes with the kid. No, those are essential. You have to know him as a person. His relationship with his son was important. Very.
Again, this is kind of the thing. You mentioned you wanted more of John Bernthal and Josh Lucas. I'd almost rather they even minimized Josh Lucas further. If we're gonna play with adding new stuff, his character, again, repeatedly being an antagonist for no other purpose than we need an antagonist because Screenwriting 101 says so.
I was going to say, or write him out of the movie and say all that stuff came from Ford and have Josh Bernthal always be like the guy between Ford and Shelby.
Yeah, that would work. That would work very much as well. Unless, I don't know, there might have been negotiations with the estate of the Ford family to, okay, hang on, we can't you can't portray him as a giant. You can't make him analogous to Trump because we know you want to. And let's be clear, we all know they would have.
Yeah.
But no, I agree with that completely. Like, his character serves so little purpose to the narrative, apart from setting, because he is the guy, and this is absolutely true, who suggested all of the Ford cars crossing the finish line at the same time. He's the one who suggested that. That's absolutely accurate. So, if you're going for historical accuracy, you do need a bit of context for that character, but I feel they could have accomplished it in other ways.
Sure. Look, that is the thing that happens in film, is that they sometimes take a character or a few characters and either combine them into one person or give those... Just famously, and this always comes to mind, a lot of what Tom Bombadil does in the Fellowship of the Ring, they gave to another character or two.
Well, if you want another example, this actually, at one point during the filming of Schindler's List, because they had plenty of Holocaust survivors and experts and whatnot on consulting on the film. And there were things that were happening differently, and Spielberg at one point kind of had to go We're making a movie, not a documentary.
Yes, which is something I often have to tell people. We talked about this with like Bohemian Rhapsody and what's the other? The Elton John movie, Rocket Man, where I've had conversations with people. I had like a cousin on Facebook was like, I didn't like Rocket Man. It wasn't completely accurate. It's like I have long since, and this is just an aside, I really won't make a big thing out of this, but I have long since decided that if I have to, if something has to be written on my headstone, it's going to be, I don't need to have the last word. You don't need to know what my opinion is, which is a weird thing to say on your own podcast, but hear me out. There are people who I just know that an interaction with them is going to generate a needless argument, that they can't just hear an opinion and consider it, that it has to be, they have to have the last word. And in some of these cases, it's not fucking worth it to me. So, for example, I have a cousin who puts on Facebook publicly, I didn't like Rocket Man. It wasn't accurate to Elton John's life. And I had to really fight the urge to be like, it's not a documentary, you dumb fuck. Now, probably wouldn't have written it that way, cousin and all. Also, don't want to generate an argument. But even if I written it nicely, it's not a documentary. It's creative licensing. It would have gone nowhere. I wasn't going to convince him otherwise. That's just kind of the state of the general national conversation. Nobody's mind changes. You don't convince them of anything. They don't see another point of view. They just argue back.
Yeah, I know of people who were not big fans of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings because he didn't film every page of the book.
Yep. Oh, yeah, I've been screaming about that. The Tom Bombadil effect.
Well, it's not, part of it's that, but like I heard that argument. Like I heard someone else relay it to me. I've never had this argument in person, to be clear, but someone else mentioned like their whole thing was, why didn't they just film the book? Like,
because you don't have 100 hours.
Okay, yeah, you have buddy, you have no idea.
Yeah,
it's not a real no.
But that's not even how you make a movie. There's things that happen. Like we talked about this, I think, a little bit with Dr. Sleep and The Shining, where authors will write settings and atmosphere and inner monologues and stuff, and that's not all stuff you show in a movie.
Yeah, you can't really show a character's inner monologue. You have to have reasons for them to talk. You have to show it through other means.
I mean, you could voice the inner monologue. The Lois Lane thinking, "Can you read my mind?" as Superman flies her around Metropolis. But do you really want that in all your movies all the time, ad nauseum?
Yeah, it's not a thing that should be done. It's why adaptation of material is difficult. It's not an easy thing. If it were an easy thing, everyone would do it. It's not. It's difficult. And credit to the people who can do it well.
Well, Sean and I talked about this with The Shining, with Kubrick, who I think Kubrick took the idea of The Shining and he made his own movie with it. It is an adaptation. It is not a direct translation.
For the record, if you want a more direct translation, there's a made-for-TV miniseries that was wholeheartedly approved by Stephen King. It sucks.
Last words on this, because I think we've said all that we need to say.
The racing sequences are great. This is some of the best.
Did you agree with me about the sound?
I didn't get it the way you did.
What theater did you see? This is important. Did you see it in a digital theater or a Dolby? Or IMAX?
I genuinely don't know, actually.
You probably saw it in a digital theater, where the sound isn't going to be as crisp.
Probably. So, look, I will bow before your experience with that. And to be fair, I have no issue with the sound design at all. The racing sequences are great. The performances are great. And again, the nitpicks that we have, this isn't even a circumstance where we have an easy solution. Like, again, when we talked about Age of Extinction, I said, here's 30 minutes you can cut out of this movie and everything's better. Relatively easy solution. Or, other instances. Like, hey, with Dr. Sleep, how about we just have a better ending? You know? Like, there's some of this stuff is sometimes, and it's the easy ones that are deeply frustrating. Like, no, you should have done it this way. It's very obvious you should have done it this way. Why didn't you do it this way? In this instance, again, there's a few kind of minor paradigm shifts that I think would have been interesting to explore from a storytelling perspective. But even then, on the whole, it's that's a real minor thing. What we have is a very good movie with the two leads are very, very good. To the point where come awards season, we will probably see some nominations for these two, and deservedly so.
The sound design definitely deserves a nomination.
Absolutely. Like, there's some really good stuff here. And it's nice to talk about a good movie that we both enjoyed for once.
Yep. I jokingly said, I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. The movie's fine. Like, that's not our stock in trade. But we found something. Cause...
Yet, well, I mean, hey, our most popular reviews are actually reviews where we say nothing but, like, hey, The Grinch.
Oh, my
loved
God.
our review of The Grinch, where we said nothing but positive things.
Yeah, that was incredible. All right, here comes the money. Whoops, wrong one. Here we go.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, money, money.
Dollar, dollar. Dollar, dollar.
At this time, I would like to remind you that this was released by the Fox Studio, which is now owned by Disney. On a budget of about $100 million, give or take, the movie at the time of this recording has made $56.2 million, and it won its weekend.
Okay, so do we want to just do the Charlie's Angels thing right now?
Well, let's give Ford versus Ferrari its due.
Okay.
And then we can talk about that. So Ford versus Ferrari was the number one movie of the weekend.
Yay. Yay, all of you who went to see this movie and made it such. Thank you.
Okay.
See good movies.
Because not only is there an issue with Charlie's Angels, but there's also a secondary issue with Warner Brothers that needs discussion.
Okay.
So, Ford versus Ferrari was the number one movie of the weekend. Midway, which was the number one movie last weekend, beating out Dr. Sleep, by the way.
Shame on everyone who went to see Midway, by the way.
Your mother. Fell from 1 to 2. Charlie's Angels, get woke or get punched, as my daughter would say. Debuted at number 3. Playing with
Cratered.
Blew up on Launchpad. Playing with Fire, starring John Cena and Michael Keegan, fell from 3 to 4, which was an adorable movie. Just lovely.
Not true.
Last Christmas.
Not as bad as we all feared it was going to be, but not true of that. It's
Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, but the very next fell from 4 to 5.
I know that song.
Dr. Sleep.
Yeah, utter shame too, by the way.
2 to 6. That's quite the steep drop.
Yeah, if that's going to recover, it's going to need international help.
The Good Liar debuted at number 7 because nobody wants to see nobody wants to see Dirty Rotten Scoundrels with two really, really, really old people in 2019.
It does. You know, I'm not one of those guys who tends to be. How do I say this? Like, okay, I tend to just simply accept that most of the time, if you avoid something, even in general category, you're not doing so out of malicious bias. That is to say, oh, you didn't see this movie featuring black people, you must be a racist. No, maybe you just didn't want to see the movie. Or you clearly hate women because you didn't see Charlie's Angels. No, maybe this movie just looked like it was terrible. Like, I'm willing to go along with all of that. There does seem to be a growing, and I believe the term that everyone uses for this is ageist,
Yep.
kind of mentality at the moment that I find slightly disturbing on a societal level.
Look, before this continues, let me tell you where we are right now. Because this is something that Alexis and I talked about with regards to Charlie's Angels, but I think it applies to a movie like The Good Liar. 20 years ago, we didn't have flat screen TVs. We didn't have streaming services. We barely had the internet. We didn't have social media outside of maybe MySpace. I don't remember. But Facebook's not going to come along until several years later, and Twitter shortly after that. So 20 years ago is 1999, right?
Yep.
So again, no streaming services, no flat screen television, no HD TV.
Way to make me feel old, man. just for the record, 1999, 20 years ago.
Yeah, imagine how I feel.
You look, whatever crises you had about your age, you had it 10 years ago.
I've always wanted to be older, so I didn't go like my crisis about my age now would be I wouldn't have one if for the fact that I have health issues. But if I didn't have those health issues, I wouldn't care. That's the weird thing.
No, that's the healthy thing.
So anyway, we didn't have flat screens, didn't have HDTV. If you wanted you might have had surround sound because surround sound is just speakers up all over your living room, but we're talking like theater quality, crisp surround sound doesn't really become a thing till later unless for the average person who isn't willing to spend $1 zillion on a home entertainment system. If you wanted a cinematic experience, if you wanted to see great big special effects on the big screen in crisp, clear picture with booming surround sound, you had to go to the theater. You had to. For most movies, you had to go to the theater or wait several months for them to be released at Blockbuster or Hollywood Video, and shortly thereafter, Redbox and Netflix. Because there's this like really weird period of time where there's plenty of places to get physical DVDs, but streaming isn't yet a thing. So for a lot of people, like Redbox and the initial physical DVD distribution of Netflix was a thing because they didn't want to go to the movies, but that was a smaller group of people than the ones willing to make the trek out. And even then, that was somewhat undercut in certain big cities by bootleggers. People who sold stolen copies of movies, usually many of them recorded on like handhelds, in your trench coat in the back of the theater somewhere, and hopefully you got a decent view of the thing, or you got someone's head in there, and you don't know until you bought the thing. But that's all then. So 20 years ago, a movie with like Ian McKellen and I can't remember the other lady who's in The Good Liar.
Helen Mirren.
I think people would have gone to go see it. I think people, like my parents' age group, people on the latter half of 40 would have gone to see that. You've got two really good actors, and it's a good fun night out. Now, there's nothing in that movie that speaks to the kind of urgency that draws people to theaters in 2019. So I understand the argument of you got to release some stuff, but I mean, again, we did. Ford versus Ferrari did just fine. But there are less and less movies that are going to be a guaranteed success on the big screen when now you have this dearth of options to watch things at home in a theatrical experience.
Dearth means a lack of.
Then what am I thinking of?
What we have is a glut.
Okay, I keep reversing the definition of dearth. That's not the first time I've done that with you.
No, but it's okay. Look, you can do it with me. I'm happy to correct you each time. It's okay.
Fantastic. Glut of options for people who want a the theater experience in the safety of their home when no one's going to shoot at them. Maybe. So,
the fact that you go straight to the shooting,
considering it happened in Florida and it wasn't like a kid brought a fucking former sheriff's deputy shot somebody in the theater because he shushed them.
Okay, I might get a ton of crap for this, but I'm gonna say it. I've never been to a theater where I had two exceptions to this, and I consciously made both of these decisions knowing that I was going to have the experience of the raucous crowd. Because 3 of the Avengers movies I saw on opening. I did like midnight showings, and the first one I should have anticipated more what was going to happen. So when I saw Infinity War and Endgame, very, very, I don't know if I did those midnight or anything like that, but when I saw those under near as I can get to first run screening, I knew what I was in for as far as the crowd effect. I
remember seeing the Phantom Menace at Universal City Walk in Los Angeles, and the first time R2-D2 showed up on screen, people clapped like idiots.
Yeah, I go back and forth on how I feel about people applauding at the end of a movie. On the one hand, from a purely utilitarian perspective, there's no one there to receive your applause.
Yeah, that's always bothered me.
On the other hand, I can appreciate it as a genuine expression of your appreciation for what you just experienced as the movie. So I go a little bit back and forth on that one, but my desire not to see movies in theaters, I think at this point in time, stems from one, just trying to find screenings that are not going to be filled with people who are going to talk and ruin the experience.
Sure.
I told you about when we reviewed Battle of the Five Armies. There was some family sitting in the row right behind me who apparently didn't know that all the dwarves were going to die.
Oh God, yeah, I remember, because I had 2 girls behind me, and every time one of the dwarves died, she bursted into tears, and her friend was like, "Do I need to take you out of here?" And I almost turned around and said, "Yes, you do." Yeah,
that book is 50, 60 years old. Come on, it's ridiculous.
And not to mention, it's a prequel after the Lord of the Rings trilogy had already been out for several years. Did it not clue you in that none of these fucking characters showed up?
Yeah. And I think here's the other reason, and not to go on too big a tangent here, but movies these days, and this is not a they were better back in my day kind of spiel, but this is an observation about a shift within film. Movies used to be shot for the big screen. You went to see a movie on the big screen because the only way to truly experience it was to see it under those circumstances. If you saw it at home, it just wasn't the same. My dad's favorite example of this, we watched the Star Wars movies when I was a small child. And then when I was young still, they did the big anniversary re-release of them in theaters.
Yep.
And my dad said, "Hey, let's go see Star Wars in theaters." And my response, being the somewhat utilitarian, concrete individual that I am, even as a smaller child, was, "I've seen this. I can watch this at home if I'm so inclined." And my dad, to his eternal credit, said, "Trust me, come on. Star Wars..." And again, I am not a big Star Wars fan, but the original trilogy, if you don't see it on a big screen, is not the same movie as you get if you watch it at home. It's just not.
just as an aside, when those came out, we saw them at this. The town is called Seaford, in Long Island. Syosset. Excuse me, Syosset. And there's these theaters that use like planetarium type screens, so like they're domed.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, and that's where we saw the Star Wars trilogy.
Anyway, the point there being, the last time I saw a movie in theaters and went, and I walked out of the movie and went, I needed to see this on a big screen. That's the only way to really get it. Like this is a movie you need to see under these circumstances.
Endgame?
No. Interstellar, actually.
Really? Okay.
You've seen Interstellar, right?
I have not.
Oh god. Yeah, I saw that on the big screen and walked out and went, "Oh, that's why I go see movies on these giant screens." Like, sure, there's stuff in Endgame that is.
I don't think you can really appreciate the scope of the Avengers Assemble bit without seeing it on the big screen.
Yeah, that again. There's a few bits in there that are certainly enhanced by that, but the bulk of that movie,
Meh.
there's no like I could fire it up on Disney Plus right now.
Yeah.
And there's not an appreciable difference in the experience watching it on my computer screen than there was on the big screen in a theater full of people.
So all of this to say that, look, The Good Liar might be a fantastic movie, and certainly, Sir Ian McKellen and Helen Mirren are no slouches in the drama department. But is this a movie you need to see on the big screen? No. This is a movie that is perfectly fine streaming from your home. Does this create a sense of urgency? Is there anyone like, you know what I gotta go see? The fucking Good Liar. No. And so the riddle of steel that movie executives need to wrestle with and figure out and solve is with their slate of movies that they're working on, because I don't think that's going to change as such. The art being created, I don't think changes significantly. The distribution changes significantly. There are some theatrical movies that that are still going to be shot, but whether or not they are distributed via HBO Max or Peacock or Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus or the good old-fashioned cinema is going to be a whole other conversation.
Martin Scorsese got a lot of crap for what he said about Marvel movies in general. And in fairness, a lot of his point was badly put. And again, he deserved some of the backlash he got. And Martin Scorsese hasn't made a good movie since The Departed. He finally got his Oscar and checked out. But elements of his point about, do we really want to live in a world where the only, and I know Mark's answer to this is yes. But do you really want to live in a world where the only movies being released in cinemas are Marvel or DC or the Fast and the Furious 27?
My friend has a projector that he has linked to the internet. And so when we go over to his house to watch, we watched Errol Spence versus Sean Porter at his house, we saw it on a big screen that he had put up, that he fired off from his projector, that he linked to whatever pirate site he was using.
Just gonna out your friend like that, huh?
Oh, look. Okay, where were the details in that to where anyone could go after him? My point being is that if you, and this is why I started with the statement that I made before. To me, that's kind of a hollow argument. Do we really want to live in a world where they don't? Well, considering I can set up a screen and a projector and have the same fucking experience in my living room, you just need to make the shit available. Period. I don't. The distribution is no longer the static structure it had been for 100 years. It's the long tail of distribution has utterly turned that on its head. So if you want to go out and make The Lobster, make The Lobster. If you want to view The Lobster as a cinematic experience, you can do that in the comfort of your own home for not that much money. It's kind of a silly argument to me. Do you see what I'm saying?
I understand elements of your point. At the same time,
like, why are we so hung up on the sort of archaic structure of I gotta go to a place to see a thing? It's become it's utterly changed.
In a lot of ways, yes. I think part of the reason people discuss it the way they do, and look, some of this is just money. Because what's your return on investment for a movie that gets released on Hulu or Disney Plus?
Okay, so you're asking on behalf of the studios.
I'm saying it's a consideration. I mean, it's one of the things that I kind of thought Scorsese's point was just lost on. Like, there's less independent studios. Like, okay, but every big studio now has like 3 subsidiary, like, sub-branches of that studio that specialize in independent film. Like,
I don't know. There has to be some math that works in favor of the model I was just discussing, or you wouldn't have everybody tripping over each other to create their own personalized streaming service.
Oh, no. Like, there is, but that bubble is going to burst in the very, very near future.
The bubble of 800 million streaming service is going to burst, but...
Oh, no. Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm not saying that streaming as a technology is somehow going away.
We're not going back to brick and mortar, buddy. I hate to tell you. The internet bubble bursted too. You may have noticed we're still using it.
Yeah, and again, that's what I mean when I say that that streaming bubble is going to burst. Not that streaming is going to go away, but everybody and their dog having a premium subscription service, yeah, that ain't flying.
No, I honestly think what's going to end up happening is you'll still see a lot of the streaming services exist, but just like the .com bubble, the .com thing was, well, we'll put up banner ads, and that's where we'll get our money from our advertising will be banner ads. And when that didn't work and everything bursted and companies went out of business, they found other models to make money off the internet, and here we are 20 years later. I think what's going to happen with streaming services is that the paid subscription model is probably going to cannibalize itself. You'll have a few, strong survivors with big backers that will last. Like Disney Plus will always be a subscription service. That's not changing. But I think some of these other ones, it's going to go. It's funny. It's going to follow sort of a concentric circle of paid advertisements. So we're back to that again. So instead of like a 3 to 4 minute break of commercials on a traditional television cable thing, you'll have it in your subscription service, which you already do. Like when I watch the CW stuff on their app, that's not a paid app, and I don't have to have cable to use it. What I do get though is the show breaks 3 or 4 times in an hour, and I get 2 or 3 commercials in between them.
Yeah, I mean, ESPN Plus has commercial breaks.
Yeah. Hulu has... My subscription for Hulu has commercials.
Yeah, if Hulu, the basic subscription tier for Hulu has ads. You pay like double, and then they cut the advertisement out.
Right. All right, so...
Anyway, that is to say, Charlie's Angels bombed and was terrible.
Well, we got this started because, why didn't more people go see The Good Liar? We just spent the last 20 minutes to basically say because they'll be able to stream it at home and not get shot. That's why. The Joker fell from 6 to 8, by the way, and has now made over $1 billion.
Not only most profitable, but now highest grossing R-rated movie ever.
Yep. Maleficent.
Good for that movie.
Maleficent fell from 7 to 9. Harriet fell from 8 to 10 in its third week in the box office. So funny. I saw a coworker of mine at the theater. She was with her family. I was with my family. And I'm like, oh, what are you guys going to see? Harriet. What are you guys going to see? Playing with Fire. Just, I was just like, please just go watch your Focus feature. We're gonna go see this schlock-looking Nickelodeon film. Terminator, speaking of schlock, fell from 5 to 11. Jojo Rabbit 11 to 12. Zombieland 9 to 13. Parasite 13 to 14. The Addams Family 10 to 15.
Gotta see Parasite.
12 Countdown 12 to 16. Black and Blue 15 to 17 because nobody saw it. God, at this time, I think that this is either the total gross for Black and Blue right now is $20 million. Oof.
Oh, that is awful.
Motherless Brooklyn 14 to 18. The Lighthouse 18 to 19. And finally, in its second week in the same darn place in 8 weeks total, Abominable from Universal Pictures.
All right, so you mentioned to me off air that you wanted to talk you just have to talk a little bit about how Elizabeth Banks is getting the wrong read about why Charlie's Angels bombed.
Okay, this is going to be partially Elizabeth Banks stop being a tart, and partially in defense of Elizabeth Banks.
All right.
So, Elizabeth Banks, let me first start in defense of this woman, because she made a movie that was
terrible.
Shut up. That was very feminist, very pro-girl power, which is her right to do. The women who worked on this movie believed in it. Patrick Stewart apparently was willing to take a check for it. So, it was one of those movies where it was like, hey, let's make a female-centric action movie with a lot of women. And unfortunately, I think like if we had talked about it as a review, my one criticism really would have been this is yet another movie where men are either dopes, villains, or awesome but sexless. Utterly toothless. So, which, whatever. I don't get offended by that stuff anymore. I don't know if I ever really got that offended by it in the first place. I kind of just accept. It's kind of like, I used to get on my grandmother for getting upset about how Italians were always portrayed as idiots or mobsters. Like, just relax. And it would be hypocritical for me now to be like, stop portraying males this way. It's like, well, I just won't watch them. How about that?
Yeah, look, if that's the movie you want to make and that's the direction you want to go, fine. Just be aware of how much of your potential audience you're immediately ostracizing.
But, my daughter had, I thought, not a valid point, but I thought she had a valid observation. Because it's the same one that Elizabeth Banks had, which was, if we make a movie that is for women, that has a very female color palette, that has some interesting female stars in it, that it's just everything, that it hits this one section of the population, then those people will come out and support it. And she made the mistake, and my daughter made the mistake that I think a lot of people do, is that it's not that women don't like action movies. I think some of them do. I don't think it's their main genre. But I think they'll go. But many of them are drawn to the ones that star men. Shirtless, sweaty, muscular men. So
the notion that women have a homogenized point of view and taste in film is laughable. Like, that's the laughably sexist point.
Yeah. So, like, my daughter, who is 8 years old, wants to see women kicking ass. When she hits puberty, I don't know if she's still going to feel that way. So, essentially, you made a movie...
When she hits puberty, she's going to go to the movies to get away from her brother.
So, here's the thing. Like, you went out with this sort of, pro-feminist, women-only point of view for your movie, and then we're surprised that nobody saw it except for the few women that fall into that category. And the one dumb dad who brought his daughter.
Also, if I might offer, like, a couple of counterpoints to her kind of generalized argument about, well, you clearly aren't going to go see movies with women in positions of power. Captain Marvel made $1 billion.
Yeah.
Wonder Woman made, $600 million?
Yeah, something like that.
Mad Max Fury Road, which is an extraordinarily feminist piece of film in tone, and I don't mean that as a negative, mind you, made, 400-some-odd million dollars, and we're talking profit here, not gross, and should have won the Oscar, cleaned up a bunch of Oscars and should have won at least 3 more that it didn't, for reasons that are incredibly nebulous.
One of my friends wrote me today about the whole Elizabeth Banks thing, and we were joking about it and the whole get woke or get punched thing. And I said, not for nothing, but the same group that Elizabeth Banks is sort of complaining about are the same people who are clamoring for a Black Widow movie. So again, guys are not shying away from action movies starring women, but you have the same problem with those movies as we just talked about with The Good Liar, and that is it's hard to get people to come. Look, they've tried this already. There was Salt. There was they did like a spy action thing with Jennifer the Hunger Games broad.
Jennifer Lawrence.
Thank you.
Red Sparrow.
Yeah,
Well, hang on. Red Sparrow with its subject material was never going to be a big, like, broad market appeal.
They just did one with Jennifer Garner where she, like, seeks revenge on, like, the mob for killing her family.
They tried to do a female Punisher with Jennifer Garner. It was called Peppermint.
Yeah.
Nobody saw it.
Right. They keep trying. And it's like, you have a bigger problem of people not wanting to go to the movies unless it's something recognizable or something that they've already got buy-in for, is the larger point. It's less about gender roles and genre than she thinks it is. Here's where things for me were like, well, now you're being a little too hard on the beaver. She had this throwaway line because she was asked why was it necessary to make another Charlie's Angels movie, which sounds like a question that was asked by my father-in-law.
Well,
and she shot back, you've had 37 Spider-Man movies. I think it's okay to have another Charlie's Angels. And you know what? She's not wrong. We live in a world with constant rehashing of IP. They're making a Grease series, for fuck's sake, for HBO Max.
Again, there's a better way for her to make that point than to say you've had 37 Spider-Man movies.
Is there?
Yes. Because there have only been 7, and nobody talks about a full 4 of them.
I think her larger point, which got lost because how dare you attack comic book movies, like, boy, this is becoming an area of sensitivity that I'm not comfortable with, was that we rehash IP all the time.
Yeah, and really, I think that's what should have been said. Like, hey, look at what sticks. Like you've had how many Spider-Man reboots? You can phrase it like that. You've got a bunch of Spider-Man reboots. You've had how many Star Trek spin-offs?
Right.
You've had they're making, like you said, they're making a Grease series. Like, you're really gonna get annoyed at a studio and some people looking at this franchise as something to potentially revivify. I get that.
There have been so many Supermen in just the modern era of television and film. 3 or 4 of them are going to be on the CW Crisis on Infinite Earths. I mean, without having invented they're inventing one new one. But I think even like the Brandon Routh, Kingdom Come is kind of is sort of a wink and a nod to Superman Returns. Like, that's the Kingdom Come universe all of a sudden.
They're having Brandon Routh, Tom Welling. They had the one from Supergirl,
right?
And they're making up another one.
Brandon Routh is the one they're making up.
Oh,
which is again a wink and a nod to Superman Returns.
Yeah, so you've got 3 or 4 iterations of that character
in just that series. Yeah,
my question with regard to this would be, is not, I think the question was phrased badly. I think a better question for the generalized marketplace is anyone asking for this?
Again, that's a silly question because they make stuff people aren't asking for constantly, and sometimes it works.
And again, if that's the response is, hey, we took a shot kind of in the dark, and it didn't work out. You know what? Fair play.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
The problem isn't that they remade Charlie's Angels. The problem is...
the movie sucked.
Well, yeah, but the problem is that they casted the Jasmine from the Aladdin movie, I don't know who the black girl is, and Kristen Stewart, who's done an amazing job of doing, of doing a bunch of indie flicks since Twilight, to where I think she's either been nominated for awards. I mean, look, nobody says Kristen Stewart's a bad actress based on the post-Twilight stuff that she did that people saw on their television at home. So, you know, like, and Kristen Stewart, like, I almost hate to say, here's the point that I made when talking to some different folks about Charlie's Angels. When the McGee ones casted Drew Barrymore, Cameron Diaz, and Lucy Liu at, like, the height of their popularity. 20 years ago, before film completely changed. The market completely changed. In the interim 20 years after that. So now, with 20 years later, with the film industry having completely changed, distribution having completely changed, then you go and pick two relative unknown actresses, and Kristen Stewart, who the only thing, unless you've been following her indie career, the only thing she's known for is sneering and crying in Twilight movies. Who the fuck was going to go see this?
Yep.
That's the problem with the new Charlie's Angels movies, other than the silly script. But I mean, what do you think? The McGee ones were fucking, you know, Schindler's List? Those were dumb too.
No, they were terrible. The second one is one of the worst things I've ever seen.
But people saw them and people enjoyed them, you know. But again, these are not meant to be to be taken seriously. They're meant to have fun and be enjoyed. The only, like I said, I think if you put three of your top hot actresses, you know, I don't even know if at this point you'd even try with Jennifer Garner. I feel like she's past her sell-by date.
Her sell-by date was 10 years ago.
I honestly think, like, thinking about it now, I don't know, maybe one of the broads from Game of Thrones, maybe Daisy Ridley.
I mean, I like Lena Headey, but she's probably too old for that role.
I was thinking one of the kids, not the old, not the mom from Fighting with My Family.
Well, hey, look, Lena Headey's actually a pretty darn good actress.
Okay, let's go with youth here. Gosh, I can't remember the actress's name, but the one that was in Terminator Genesis, she's in the one Christmas movie that's out right now. She was in Solo. Like, I think she would have been okay.
I have no doubt that there exist capable actresses out there who could have, you know, with name value, who could have been good in the roles.
I cannot think of a single. Debbie Ryan would have been perfect.
That's an odd choice, but okay.
Why? She has that like Disney, you know, youth thing on her side. She's a great physical actress. She's funny as hell when given the right material. I think she would have been great in that role. She's not an unattractive gal.
Look, fair enough. That's your bit of fantasy casting. Okay.
I'm just trying to think. I just feel so old right now because I can't think of, like, hey, who are the hot actresses, says the 43-year-old man.
Who was the other? Florence, I forget how her last name
Pugh.
is pronounced. Yeah, sure. Throw her in there.
See, so I think that's more the point is nobody, you know, other than she was Jasmine, which I completely forgot about. I don't even think my daughter figured that one out. I had to read about it in Variety. And I don't know who the black girl is. She came from fucking nowhere. And while Kristen Stewart, she's the only one of the cast I probably would have kept, because I think if she's bookended by two, like, it girl actresses,
people with honest charisma,
I think she does okay, because she's having a ball in Charlie's Angels, and it's so much fun to watch her. It's like the most fun I've ever seen her on screen, which isn't saying much.
Yeah, that's a low bar.
So, look, I sympathize with Elizabeth Banks' point. And, you know, for her sake and the gal's sake, they all worked hard on this movie. I wish it had done better. But if you make a niche movie, you get a niche audience.
Yeah, and look, for the record, my response to what your daughter said about people who see this movie or get punched, make a better movie, then you can complain about punching people who don't see it.
All right, worldwide, let's just get this done.
Okay, hang on. Did you pause for that?
Yeah.
Okay. Because otherwise there's like 40 seconds of dead air while I eat.
No, I hit the pause button.
Okay.
Obviously, not a lot of movement at the top. Endgame, Lion King, Spider-Man, Captain Marvel, Toy Story, Aladdin, and Joker is at number 7. Fast and the Furious, Hobbs and Shaw has
Think
not
about
budged.
that for just hang on. Think about that for just 1 second. Joker made $1 billion and is number 7.
Yep. This has been quite the year for film. We know what's hilarious about that is like there are 2 headlines and they're like counter to one another. You know, Warner Brothers with the biggest profit margin ever for a single picture with the Joker, which was shot for $150, but made $1 billion. Warner Brothers, everything they've released besides the Joker has bombed.
Pretty much.
Dr. Sleep bombed. Let me go back a page here. This was
Good
like
Liar,
3
bombed.
Yeah, Dr. Sleep, The Good Liar, all bombed. Mother Looks Brooklyn, which who the fuck was going to go see that?
Why do people think Edward Norton is still a thing in 2019? Like that's not a knock on the man's acting abilities. He's always been a very, very capable actor. But it feels like people cast Edward Norton and somehow expect him to carry the same kind of cachet that it did 15 years ago.
Warner Brothers, Universal, and Paramount are all going to get drunk and fuck in a bathroom somewhere. This has not been a great year for them.
And their bastard offspring will still lose horribly to Disney.
Yep. Yeah. What a weird year when it's fucking Sony and Disney that are having a good year.
Well, Disney always has a good year.
True.
I mean, granted, this year is exceptional even by that standard, but
yeah,
and it's only going to get better for them once Star Wars comes out.
So, I don't want to take up too much more time. I want to get to the reviews and then close the show because we are quickly approaching 2 hours again. But that whole conversation needed to be had, so I'm fine with it. But next up is, I think, Frozen 2, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, 21 Bridges, Knives Out, and Queen and Slim. December.
What are we doing?
Knives Out.
Were we not doing Frozen 2?
No, I took it off the schedule.
Okay. I'm not sad at all about this. By the
No, well, part of it is just there was a lot of timing issues. But part of it was... So, like, next week is a short week in terms of what I can cover and what I can't because of Thanksgiving and Black Friday. And Survivor Series is this weekend.
And no one cares about that.
So, I got to talk about the Wu-Tang Clan, and I got to talk about Survivor Series, which didn't leave room for movies.
Wow. Those both sound terrible.
Go fuck yourself. How about that?
Oh, come on. You and I both know Survivor Series is going to suck. Raw's going to go over.
Well, I also have to talk about NXT War Games.
Which might not suck.
Hopefully it won't.
But Triple H is going over.
I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to. I don't want to talk about it till I have to talk about it.
And then you have to talk about some stupid Wu-Tang doohickey. What is a Wu-Tang?
The Wu-Tang Clan, because it ain't nothing to fuck with.
Okay. You say that like I'm supposed to have some kind of understanding.
You
of what...
know who the Wu-Tang Clan are.
You know, not really, actually.
Method Man, the RZA, the Jizza, Ghostface Killer, Inspector Deck.
I have at least heard of Method Man.
Yes, he was in The Wire. Mark that on your bingo card, everyone.
Yeah. Okay, again, him I am loosely aware of as a person who makes rap music.
Okay, they all make rap music.
Okay. So what constitutes the clan element versus them just being individuals?
They started out as they're like NWA, but from Staten Island. They are a super group of various rappers.
I don't know what NWA is.
Okay, well, it doesn't stand for National Wrestling Alliance.
I knew that. That's why I said I don't know what it is.
You really don't know what NWA was? They're like the Godfather. They're like the Godfathers of gangster rap.
Wasn't there that stupid movie about them?
Oh my God, you honky! All right, so Here's the Wu-Tang Clan is an American hip hop group formed in New York City borough of Staten Island in 1992, composed of rapper producer The RZA, rappers Jizza, Old Dirty Bastard. Come on, everyone knows who Old Dirty is.
I have no idea who that is.
Ugh. Method Man, Raekwon, Ghostface Killah, Inspector Deck, You God, and Master Killer.
Yeah, literally the only individual out of that entire series of pseudonyms you just threw at me that I've heard of was Method Man.
Okay, well, they were a very influential rap group for a long period of time.
Okay,
Actually, Showtime just did a documentary on them. And then
Showtime will do a documentary about anything.
Sure. And then on top of which, they did this series on YouTube, which Jesse and I need to talk about, and then we're going to review the album. So there.
Okay, look, I never said they weren't a thing. I said I didn't know what they were.
Well, now you know. You want to watch the show, listen to the album, and join us for those podcasts? You're invited. Come join us talking about the Wu-Tang Clan.
You do not want my opinion.
Anyway, it is because of the Wu-Tang Clan in the Survivor Series weekend that there is no time at all for Frozen 2.
Look, Frozen 1 was a terrible movie. You and I both are of that particular perspective. But, again, Frozen 2 is going to do... And I'm glad we're doing Knives Out. I'm looking forward to that.
Yep. I told my wife I was going to go see it December 1st, so it's on my calendar. It's going to happen, short of catastrophe. All right. It's got to make $200 million to have been profitable at this point. It's at 50. What I was trying to get at with running through the movie calendar is with... You know, Thanksgiving weekend is always a big weekend for people to go to the movies, get away from their family, stuff like that. I'm never allowed to because my family sucks. But I gotta spend time with my family. Bleh. But normal people all go to, I saw Casino on a Thanksgiving night. It was the best night of my life. Love that movie.
I will be sure to tell that story at one of your children's wedding.
I hope you do.
The best night of Mark's life was not the day you were born, was not the day you got married. It was seeing Casino in theaters on a Thanksgiving evening.
Yep. I stand by that
New York,
statement.
Back in 1904.
We wore onions on our belts, which was the style at that time.
Nickels had bees on them. Give me five bees for a quarter, you'd say.
Anywho, so I don't know how much competition A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, 21 Bridges, and Frozen are going to eat into this.
I mean, look, Frozen's going to run over everything.
Sure. That's a family movie. A lot of families will go out and see it, but there's certainly going to be a lot of single people who are not going to bother and will need to go see something else. The problem is there's a lot of something else coming around the same time. You know, some of those people will see 21 Bridges. Some of those people will see Tom Hanks in A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Some of those people will see Knives Out. Some of those people, I wish it were me, will be seeing Queen and Slim. So, and then Jumanji comes out, 2 weeks later.
No one's seeing Queen and Slim.
I'm seeing Queen and Slim. No, I'm not. I don't have time. My life sucks.
I was just going to say, no, you're not. As soon as it becomes available to you on a more convenient on-demand schedule, that will be one of the first things you make time to watch when you can fit it in wherever you can fit it in.
I stayed up late Saturday night just to watch Dolomite Is My Name, so you're right. There will be some Saturday after boxing or wrestling where I'll be like, well, I'm not quite ready to go to bed. Hey, Queen and Slim.
Yeah, I'm not saying you won't ever see it. You will not see it in theaters.
No. My wife's like, why don't you just go on your day off? I'm like, because I have a podcast scheduled for every fucking day off I have. Ugh.
Tell you what, if it's reviewing some other crappy movie, we can not do this and you can just go see that.
What?
If your day off is a Tuesday and you would rather go see that than talk
My
about
day off
some
is
other movie.
never a Tuesday. It's either a Monday or a Wednesday.
Well, doesn't that just suck for me? I lost an avenue of potentially getting out of things.
All right. You ready to move this on? I mean, do you think... Well, let me ask you one last question, then we'll move on. Do you think it'll end up being profitable at the end of the day? Do you think it makes its minimum a few $100 million?
Yeah, I think it probably does. The story itself is well done, and this is also a film that is going to be easily translatable to the European audiences that like the subject matter of those kinds of races anyway.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it'll probably get there. It's not gonna, again, this is not going to set the world on fire, but worldwide grosses take it, worldwide everything. Yeah, it'll probably get there.
All right. With that said, here we go.
Are you ready? No! I said, are you ready?
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Matthew Bond, The Mail on Sunday, UK. There are one or two fine moments here, but the film never quite matches motoring velocity with human emotion.
That's not true. I'm sorry. I hate to be this guy, but if you walk away from this movie and that last scene of Carroll Shelby choking up in his car after handing that wrench that means something to him to Miles' son, like, okay, this movie is not overly emotive, sure. That's not to say that there's no emotion present at all within it. I mean, Christian Bale throws a wrench at Matt Damon's head. He doesn't do that for the fun of it.
Matthew Lucas, from the front row, bloated, overlong, and celebrates the achievements of men only as they live to serve the capitalist machine, leaving anything resembling actual human drama in the dust. 1.5 out of 4.
You are just so desperate to get invited to parties, aren't you?
Are you lonely, Matthew?
Dude, I'm lonely and I won't stoop to that crap. Like, have a little bit of dignity, you
Jesus
sniveling
Christ.
weasel. I can't even pull the Leonard Maltin card like, well, you just clearly didn't want to see this movie, did you? No, buddy. You knew what you were getting into, and you just decided, this is where I will stand on my soapbox made of crap.
I wonder if he reads his review like in bars, hoping women will talk to him.
Not to be that guy, but there's no way this guy actually thinks men should be treating women like that. Like, this is not a guy who
will not insult the dignity of women by approaching them.
This is not a guy who would insult the dignity of women by becoming aroused in their presence, even if they wanted to.
I am ashamed of my penis. I am Matthew Lucas.
I wish for impotence. Because then the interactions would just like, what the... This guy. Not be taken seriously.
Dennis Schwartz of Oz's World Movie Reviews. A standard issue sports film that's well produced and well acted and made the old fashioned Hollywood way with flair, heroics, and cynicism.
I mean, if you read the DVD, like if you read the plots, the description on the back of the DVD cover, that's kind of what you might get out of that. Like, and I'm not sure why you had to bring the cynicism into. I mean, how is this a cynical movie?
I don't know.
Like, okay, sure. One of the protagonists kind of gets screwed in the end. I fail to see how that's cynical, given that this is an actual representation of what happened. Like, I don't know. To me, the notion of a movie being overly cynical requires the author, the director, the creative people behind it, to willfully inject said cynicism into the project. There's a reason a degree of cynicism exists in the world, because it is historically borne out through repetition. This is one of those cases.
I need to read these next 3 together.
Okay. 3 of them.
And I need to tell you that these are all considered by this website to be fresh reviews. This is important. Okay? This is Ed Whitfield of the Ooh Tray. Ooh! Matt Brunson of Creative Loafing. Well, I'm not sure saw the movie.
Look, I'm not entirely sure Matt Brunson is an actual human being at this point.
Matt Brunson is an internet meme. And speaking of internet memes, Leonard Maltin.
Old man Maltin doesn't know what a meme is.
In this movie released under the Fox banner after its acquisition by Disney, the
That
theme
has nothing to do with anything.
is the theme that of the team of industry pros working under experienced leadership, fighting off the imbecilic and misguided directives of the parent company. Wait, this gets better. If Rush was a movie about men who race cars...
Hang on. So that first one was just the first review.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why you in any way, shape, form, or fashion felt the need to go, hey, corporate, we don't like corporations here, and that's going to be the thrust of my review rather than actually talking about the movie. You hack.
I mean, we recognize that the movie has a distinct distaste for corporations, but I'm pretty sure it was a general thing about corporations and not a specific attack on Disney.
Yeah.
Which this guy seems to think it is. Matt Brunson, Creative Loafing. If Rush was a movie about men who race cars, this is one as much about the cars as the characters. In fact, the Ford GT40 emerges as such a prominent player that it wouldn't be surprising if Fox mounted a supporting actor Oscar campaign on its behalf. I fucking hate you, Matt Brunson.
Again, I'm not entirely sure you're actually a human being.
And finally, Leonard Maltin, professional film reviewer. This is what he's known for. Okay? Leonard Maltin on the Mount Rushmore of film critics. This film has no ambition except to entertain. And it does so exceedingly well. That's not something I take for granted.
Again, it's something you felt compelled to complain about?
Did someone get Leonard Maltin his fucking pills?
Look, somebody give him too many of his pills.
You know, I have to wonder if someone's going to hear us talking about this. Like, you know, the amount of times one guy wishes death on somebody and the other guy cracks up laughing about it like a ghoul.
Okay, for the record, if any of you think I'm being even remotely serious about that, I don't know what to tell you other than apparently sarcasm died.
20 years ago?
No, not that far back. Sarcasm died like 5 years ago, and we're just living in a post-sarcasm world. I'm a sarcastic person. You know this is part of the buy-in. I don't actually wish for someone to murder Leonard Maltin.
Ah, but do you think somebody should ride through Ethiopia with a bucket of chicken on a bicycle? Poor Jim Cornette.
That was such an ill-advised... that's an ill-advised joke. But it's... but I laughed.
All right. Well, speaking of buckets of chicken, Andrew Kendall of Stabroke News. He's black, by the way.
A bucket of chicken would... Yeah, you know what? Never mind.
Like, I dug that hole. I don't know why you're jumping in with me.
A bucket of chicken is at least a useful thing in the world. Most critics are more analogous to a bucket of...
Bones?
I'm trying to think of the most useless object I can.
Let's move on.
Talcum powder.
Andrew Kendall of Brock Lesnar News. Ford versus Ferrari never delivers any real incisive look at its characters. I can't even finish this. What? What I love about this bit is that you and I spend the first hour or so on this podcast really getting into the characters, and especially this one. And this is what this guy, who gets to be on Rotten Tomatoes, came up with.
When you can't even finish the blurb. Okay, yeah, I'm going with talcum powder because there is no substance to it.
All right, let me get through this. Ford versus Ferrari never delivers any real incisive look at its characters' motivations. nor does it deliver the excitement of an adrenaline-intensifying racing sequences.
Oh, shut up.
We're left with something fairly mechanical instead. Dude, you either didn't actually see the movie or you were fucking high the whole time.
Or both. Didn't see it and was high and wrote the review. I was gonna see this movie, but then I got high.
I was gonna write my review, but then I got high.
Yeah.
This is unfucking believable.
You wonder why we do this bit, people? Because this is the kind of thing that I'm not the biggest fan of, like, in general, call-out culture, because it's generally it's just an excuse for people to grandstand and posture and feel better about themselves. I don't do this as an exercise in grandstanding. I do this as an exercise in these people get paid for this crap, a lot of them.
Rain Jokinen of mullingmovies.com. Anyone who has watched a race, especially a long one, can't deny it can get monotonous. The same holds true for Ford v Ferrari. First of all, you bitch, you've never watched a race in your life. Get the fuck out of here. Maybe you watched the Kentucky Derby because you got invited to the party and wanted to wear the fancy hat. Maybe.
You know what? If you wish to make an analogy to racing, I'm gonna go ahead and make kind of a like quasi-executive decision here. If you can't tell me what NASCAR stands for, because it is in fact an acronym, I'm not going to hold your opinion with all that much value.
David Harris.
Well, hang on. I will limit that. No. You know what race? This is clearly a woman who has watched racing. Hang on. I know which races she's watched. She celebrated when speed walking got into the Olympics. That's her jam.
David Harris of Spectrum Culture. Ford v Ferrari feels like a throwback to the bloated prestige pictures of the 80s all the way down to its USA First message. Huh?
You know, look, you and I both mentioned this movie's it's long. There's no denying that. Apart from the length of this movie, what about this is bloated?
I was going to go with what about this is its USA First.
But you don't understand. It's the mighty Ford company, the heart of American industry, taking down the evil Italians.
Did everyone miss the first act of this movie where the object was to sell more cars? And that racing was going to be the vehicle for which, no pun intended, for which they were going to sell more cars by branding Ford as cool, racing, winning?
Yes, they clearly missed that. This is not a piece of jingoistic nationalism by any stretch of the imagination. At all. You moron.
Chris Fell of Film Mixtape. It's missing a soul.
Well, no. But, look, as a person who's, 60% robot and 33.3% dead inside, like, I can appreciate the desire to see that in other things, but this is not a soulless movie.
All right, I'm going to end with this one because we always have to find the one guy who, like, I saw a movie about a thing, and my review is going to be all thing. Thing. And in this case, thing is car.
Okay.
Frank Switek of One Guy's Opinion.
Well, at least that's an accurate at least the title is accurate.
Has the spit and polish of a top-of-the-line sports car from a technical perspective, but in dramatic terms, it's more like a conventional model that's just rolled off an assembly line. Yeah, I know how to write a euphemism.
Yeah, you going to stretch that metaphor any further there, buddy?
God.
More importantly, you're not a car person. Please don't. Just shame on you for that.
First rule of writing, write what you know. You clearly don't know cars, or movies as near as I can tell.
Shame on you for that sentence, sir.
Okay, hang on. This one's even better. Peter Travers of Rolling Stone, top critic.
Oh, God, this guy.
This guy's almost as bad as fucking Kurt Loder.
I know.
Okay, this is the actual start to this blurb. Vroom. Damon and Bale bring engine roaring life to this true tale of two racing legends hired by Henry Ford II to build a hot, fast car that can beat Ferrari at Le Mans and pit American class against Italian class. Fasten your seatbelts. You hack motherfucker.
How? Wow. Like, you wrote the synopsis that you want them to put on, like, the Netflix blurb about the movie, you wrote that for them. What was that? That's not a thing. That is a bit of marketing, that's a bit of advertisement. That's not a film review.
Yeah, that was advertising copy.
Hope you cashed the check at least, buddy.
God. All right, there's a few more rotten reviews here, but I think we've made our point rather clear.
There's a lot of morons out there talking about movies. Please support us.
All right, speaking of supporting us, tomorrow we'll be doing Dragon Force Extreme Power Metal on the Metal Hammer of Doom and She-Ra Season 4. And then The Boys Season 1 on Thursday. This Saturday night, myself and Robert Winfree will be bringing you coverage of Deontay Wilder versus Luis Ortiz 2. Next week, we're going to do something new here on the Radulich Broadcasting Network. I'm going to spend part of my day off starting the wide, wonderful history of heavyweight boxing with Pat Mullen. I can't get Pat Mullen to do a modern boxing match, regardless of weight class, if my life depended on it.
Well,
but Pat,
in fairness to Pat, so much of boxing right now is just utterly uninteresting.
But Pat does want to record, and he does want to talk about boxing. He just wants to talk about boxing from the black and white era. So we're going to start the long, strange trip of heavyweight boxing. Hope people enjoy it. I don't know how it's going to go. It's really the first time we've done something like this. Pat pitched a different idea, and we just never got around to doing it. So this is the second pitch of a show of this kind. The other one was he wanted to do the complete history of Mid-South. Mid-South with Bill Watts, right? That turned into UWF.
I can't remember I don't remember if he started Mid-South or if he started UWF.
Either way, the Mid-South / UWF Louisiana Bill Watts territory. That many
there was some interesting stuff that came out of there.
Well, a lot of the guys that came out of there were like main eventers, or in the main event scene. I mean, Ted DiBiase came out of there. Hacksaw Jim Duggan came out of there. JYD was in and out of there. Jim Cornette was in and out of there. So, Mid-South definitely has its place in wrestling history. And Pat wanted to talk about the history of it. We just never got around to it. So, this is the second pitch for Pat. And I figured, yeah, let's do it. I don't know how often we're going to do these, but we're going to give it a shot this week. In addition, as you heard before, we're also going to do Wu-Tang and American Saga, which was the first seasons on Hulu. Myself and Jesse are going to talk about that. I'll have The Boys, The Wrestling Boys.
I'm not going to watch that, but I just want to point out, I can't get Hulu to link up and log me in with my Disney Plus information, which is kind of annoying because I'm paying for it now.
There's a whole thing you got to do.
Does it involve calling them and talking to people?
I don't think so. But Tuesday night we'll be doing a TV party for the Survivor Series weekend, which encompasses NXT TakeOver War Games and Survivor Series. I think there's also a Ring of Honor card, but I'm not watching it. I've given up on that product. I tried.
No, you didn't. You wanted to meme about Matt Taven. That's it.
And finally, on the Metal Hammer of Doom, our pre-Thanksgiving turkey show, Wu-Tang Clan Enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers. We have a new member of the Radulich Broadcasting family. His name is John War from Boxing and Brews. We did.
He's an associate, not really a member yet.
Okay.
He's an affiliate.
Anyway, we tried him out on a boxing show. We went over great. He did a great job. That's Lee McGregor versus Cash Farouk. So that's up in the archives if people want to check that out. Really good boxing coverage. He did a great job. So hopefully he'll be back on the 30th. There's a couple of different boxing cards that day. There's Alexander Vesputin versus Radzab Butev on DAZN, which rhymes with calzone. There's Lerone Richards versus Lennox Clark on ESPN Plus, and Oscar Valdez versus Andre Gutierrez also on ESPN Plus. So we'll do one or more of those cards. Maybe Robert will join us. Maybe he won't. We'll see.
I hesitate to say this publicly, but I do have Saturday the 23rd and Saturday the 30th off.
Not the 23rd. You have Deontay Wilder Ortiz to do with me.
Yeah, I'm gonna be in a coma.
But no, but there's no UFC is what you're trying to say on the 30th. So I mean, if I can get John to do at least one of those, I may not bug you.
Whatever. Again, kind of a whatever thing.
Do you want to be included in the boxing?
I don't know. Some of it will depend on which one it is. There's some. Look, I joke about boxing, but there's some. There have been some really good fights this year. Some really excellent fights.
On like ones that you're like, oh, well, who's gonna watch that? And it turns out to be like the best fight of the weekend.
Hang on, no. We both. I publicly said that Sean Porter and Errol Spence was likely to be a barn burner, and that it was that and a bag of chips.
December 2nd, we've got Teen Titans by Jeff John, the first 12 issues. Knives Out, Rings of Saturn, Get 'em, Lady and the Tramp. Myself and Alexis Hannah will cover that. And then a TV party for Teen Titans Season 2. And then on Saturday, December 7th, myself and Robert Winfree will be doing coverage for Fight Night, Overeem versus Rosenstruck.
Hold on, are we actually doing coverage for that?
I have it listed, yes.
All right. I just wasn't aware that was something we were doing. I'm not. If I didn't want to do it, I'd just say no. I'm not doing it.
Okay. Oh, you're gonna be covering it. So what difference does it make? I mean, I figured you only got to pull the "I just want to be left alone to enjoy my glorious violence" when Bobby Knuckles fights.
Look, I can pull that whenever I want.
Okay.
I'm not going to in this instance. I just had kind of forgotten that we were going to podcast on that one. It's fine.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. That's it for now. I don't want to keep reading calendar stuff because inevitably things get canceled. So I'm done talking now.
All right. As for myself, this last Sunday, I'm usually the host of the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. Short episode last Sunday. We just talked about the UFC event that sucked. Not a good event. Those last two fights were just sad. Like Shogun and Paul Craig was just a sad, sad fight. But we go through the results. We talk about some of the fights. We talk about news. So if you're into MMA, then give us a listen. Always appreciated. Since there is no show this Sunday, there is nothing to preview or review, or no real major news as of yet has broken. Ben Askren retired, but I feel comfortable folding that into just for a couple of weeks from now. So instead, I'm going to try something new, and I don't actually have a name for what this might be. But I'm going to do kind of a deeper technical dive on one fight in particular, because we have UFC 245 rapidly approaching on the horizon, and that is a very stacked card with 3 title fights.
Which we'll be doing coverage for.
Yeah, we will. One of those being a featherweight title fight between Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski. And I heard someone else kind of mention that they were curious about relooking at film and figuring out how specifically Volkanovski defeated Aldo, and I figured, what the heck, I have time. I can let me take a stab at that one. So I'm trying writing up bullet points / script. It's not a word for word script. Some parts of it might be, but I'm gonna try writing that up. And I've watched all the film already. I've done the legwork. I'm just writing up what I want to do, so I have something to maybe work from. And I'm gonna wax poetic and get really noodly about some details about how he pulled that off, and I'm going to see if everyone just continues to ignore me like I'm some kind of crazy person, or if anyone's interested. So be on the lookout for that. The next time you'll be seeing me,
I had to get up to pee. What'd I miss? What are you doing?
I'm not repeating myself.
I don't need you to repeat the whole thing. Like, is this part of the actual 401 Ground and Pound radio show, or are you doing another podcast?
No, it's going to be. I'm going to release it under those auspices. It's not going to be. It's recorded anyway. It's just going to be if we're not going to have a show proper because there's no events to talk about and no catastrophic news we want to break down. Here's something I can do to fill the occasional dead week, and maybe if people are interested in it going forward, I can release it on occasion as the need arises. There's no mandate that says that thing has to be done on Sunday. If I want to record something extra and release it in the middle of the week, I can. So I'm going to see how people respond to this one, and we'll see how that goes.
You can do what you want to. You can leave your friends behind. But your friends don't dance, and if they don't dance, then they're no friends of mine.
Well, I don't really dance either, so.
Of course you don't. Fucking course you don't.
I do so deeply, deeply enjoy those moments when you assume I'm a normal human.
Cause your mama don't dance and your daddy don't rock and roll. And now we go.
Now that's a song I grew up with.
Yes. All right, folks. We failed in our mission, but that's okay. We had a fun conversation. Listen,
we're only a little over 2 hours.
We would have finished 20 minutes ago, but damn you, Elizabeth Banks, you needed both prosecution and defense. Prosecution and defense. And I needed to tell the story of how my daughter wants to punch people who didn't see Charlie's Angels. Because she's adorable.
Your daughter is welcome to try to punch me in the face.
I can't wait till she goes to college and tells me about her women's studies class. And I have to choke on my words of, why are you wasting my money on this useless horseshit class?
No. You just make it abundantly clear to her. You can study whatever you want. Here's what I will subsidize.
Hey, why did only half my tuition get paid for? Because you're taking bullshit, that's why.
Because I told you I'm not subsidizing women's studies, lesbian dance theory, or your art history. All of which
in her current things that she enjoys are something she's likely to take, by the way.
You just hope that they grow out of these phases.
You really do. All right, folks. It's enough hooting and hollering and lollygagging about. Thank you for joining us for Damn You Hollywood. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Be well, be safe, and behave.